welcome to episode 5 of the story of with Manny Lagunes. Manny, welcome back. Welcome back. We are continuing on with your story. We've learned a lot about you, where you came from, a little bit about your background, how things started, and we were just at a point where we were kind of finding out where you were in your life prior to things getting real. And so now here we are, episode 5. We're at a point where stuff really starts to hit the fan. I've never been deported. I don't know what it's like. I don't really have any friends outside of you that have been deported, so I don't really know anything about the process and what happens. But my curious question is, how did you even get on their radar? What was going on in your life that caused them to realize? Because there's a lot of people, a lot of immigrants or Mexican immigrants that are inside of Michigan that never really get caught or never, reach the point where they get deported or whatever. You obviously did something. So what happened that caused you to get on their radar?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I would want to say that there's a stigma out there that immigration sort of goes rounding people up and deporting them. That's not so much the case in Michigan. Um, you are absolutely right. You do have to sort of get on their radar. We can start, I guess, and it might not be very relevant, but my criminal record, I guess you could speak, began when I was 15 years old. I was stopped for driving without a license at 15 years old. Mind you, I did not have a process to get the license, so that was sort of a gray area. But that's sort of when my criminal record began. It
Well,
wasn't
let
so
me
much.
ask this question. Are you able to get a license being an unregistered? Okay.
No, you need a social security
So if
number.
somebody came over as an illegal immigrant, you would just go your whole life without having a legitimate license?
Correct. That's correct, and that presents a different amount of troubles.
Wow.
Just as buying liquor. If you have a baby face and you try to buy some liquor and you don't have and you're over the age and you don't have a license or identification, you're not going to get it. But that's besides, I guess, the point. So because I don't think that's very relevant, but it is safe to say, I guess every teenager sort of gets into trouble, right? Well, not every, but a lot of them growing up in America gets into trouble with the police, minor trouble. All I did was pay that ticket, $250, nothing big, driving without a license. Maybe at 15 it was a big deal, but whatever. So, but what eventually ended up happening was, I would say it, bad influences. And what I mean by that is, growing up, my parents definitely, growing up in America, in Michigan, my parents definitely did the best to provide for me and my siblings. Um, but for whatever reason, I felt that at a young age, 14, 15, and so forth, I needed to sort of contribute, a little bit to the family. I needed to at least look out for myself. One of the biggest things that I remember was when I entered high school, and they had this thing called pay to play. You essentially had to pay in order to just try out for a team, basketball, football, soccer, whatever it was. You know, and my freshman year, my mom told me, you know what, we don't have the money to so that you can try out. And I sort of looked at that like, okay, well, why not? Like we have, I thought, we have a pretty nice life. Why can't we, pay? It was 150 at the time to try out, and that's eventually when I started, sort of slipping, you could call it. Up until my middle school years, I was a straight A student. You know, Freshman year hit, and started slipping. I started looking for sort of quick ways to make money. You know, and a lot of the people that I was hanging around with were old friends of mine. Some of them older, some of them my age, but they were people that I trusted, that I looked to when things got rough. And eventually, what one of my friends ended up introducing me to was sort of I guess, the world of cannabis, marijuana. And
I
a
assume
lot of
that
people.
this was before marijuana became legal.
Yeah, yeah, you got to understand this was back in 2012, 2011, 2012. Um, yeah, 2011, I would say. And I mean, you might know this because of working with me, but I was a heavy consumer of marijuana, and I used to smoke marijuana. Safe to say, I've been clean for the past 2.5 years. So shouts
Congratulations.
out to me. Thank you. But eventually, what I saw was an opportunity for me to make quick money. At that time, 2011, 2012, I wasn't smoking. I wasn't really so much consuming it. I was more concerned into making money, And again, I was sort of in tight relationships with a lot of my, good friends. A lot of people that were really, how would you say, that's really what they did for a living, Sort of the cultivating aspect, distribution, whatever you want to call it. That's what they did for a living. And at the time, I was just a young kid, 15, 16-year old, like looking to make a quick buck, trying to get the next pair of shoes that came out, trying to, get some nice clothes, whatever it was. And eventually, I did my sophomore year. I did ended up sort of paying my way to try out for various sports teams. That didn't take off. Obviously, I'm still,
Obviously not in basketball. I've played you in that before,
yeah,
but keep going.
right. Well, that's another story for another time. But yeah, I've been a basketball fan. You know that personally, but it didn't happen. And I have to say that it's also because of the bad decisions that my grades started slipping. I started spending more time sort of hanging out with the wrong crowds than in school doing homework. Um, my what do you call it? My sort of reputation in school became a little how not a good one, you could say, amongst teachers. I actually got expelled my senior year, weeks before graduation date. I got expelled over what you could call just a problem and differences with other students. Um, it was really a big a big problem. I got expelled. Police were involved in the school. Ann Arbor's FBI department was involved in the school, but eventually they did allow me to walk. I did graduate on time. I cleared my name of all wrongdoing, but I guess that wasn't enough for me. Like that should have been the wake up call right there. Like I spent 4 years in high school working towards a goal of graduating high school, and weeks before it, I throw it all down the drain, and here I am in jeopardy of not graduating, not receiving my diploma. That should have been my wake up call, and it wasn't. After graduating high school, I mean, I just sort of dedicated to working in restaurants, working at Red Robin, working in factories. I did some environmental design. Um,
Sorry.
I worked at another restaurant called Los Amigos. Some of you watching this may know it. Um, but that's also what opened, I guess, sort of my, how would you call it, my view on markets, my view on customers, I guess you could call them, man, if I'm being blunt. Um, and that's when I really decided, like, okay, you know what? Well, maybe it's time to start moving up in the sort of distribution aspect, And although I was working, here and there, and I was switching jobs constantly, it was like my main source of what I would call um, money for myself was just my under the table sort of business deal, distributing marijuana, selling whatever you want to call it, being a dealer, I guess you could call it. And I did find myself on the short end of the stick a couple of times in that aspect, where sometimes the money I was supposed to have wasn't didn't add up. I ended up owing some people some money, but eventually, as well, I cleared up whatever this and that. The biggest problem that I ran into though was the whole aspect of um, sort of dealing with police that already sort of knew me because of an early criminal background or history, and eventually just sort of keeping an eye out for me. I remember there was a time in Ipsy, I was at a gas station buying whatever it was I was buying, and I got out of the store, hopped in my car, and like there was a police SUV, one of the Tahoes, was at a pump, and nobody was like pumping gas. The cops inside the car, and I got in my car, whatever. As soon as I pulled up, they pulled up behind me, and they followed me all the way home. When they followed me all the way home, and I was living on my own at this time, they sort of cut me off in front of me, and you know. turned on the lights, got out of the car. I didn't get out of the car, but they approached my vehicle and they asked me what I was doing, what I was trying to do, and they asked me if I had been out of trouble, if I had stayed out of trouble, and I'm sitting there like, you don't know me. This was like literally harassment. So at that point, again, that's another great wake up call to. It's like where maybe you need to slow down and stop, putting yourself in these situations where law enforcement knows
I'm
and
I'm
again,
confused though how they just randomly were profiling you, or was there a reason as to why
oh,
they picked you to follow home?
here's the thing. That's the thing though. Between then and when I graduated high school, I had been stopped a handful of times. A handful of times for maybe having gone five over the speed limit, petty stuff like that. Tinted windows was a big one. Eventually, I got a doctor's note,
So they ran
and
your
eventually,
plates and looked at your history.
and a lot of these times, I remember one of the times when they moved me over for tinted windows because that's what made me get a doctor's note saying that I could have tinted windows and that you can have a prescription for that. Um, when they pulled me over, the police said that he smelled marijuana, and that was probable cause for a search. Granted, yes, I did have marijuana, nothing enough to be convicted on, very big, but that's when eventually it started, sort of keeping an eye out for my car. It was a little, I don't know if you would call it distinguishable, but it was, sort of a shady looking car, just all black tinted windows, So eventually they did. I was in and out of court. It was always the same court on Washington on Hardback Road, if anybody knows where that is in Ipsy. So prosecutors knew me, public defendants knew me, your street cops knew me, and it was very funny also because I once went to just um, be there for one of my cousins who this is a female cousins who got a speeding ticket, and when I went to sort of just give her emotional support and be there for her, one of the prosecutors asked me, she was like, "What are you in here for?" And I looked at her and I'm like, "This is not about me this time. Like, and this is real life." She asked me, she turned around like, "What are you here for?" I'm like, "This is not for me. Like, I'm not the one on trial this time." Like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm 100% sure. My dues have been paid." And that's another again, just so many wake up calls that I should have really took seriously, because eventually what ended up happening was, um, I got and I don't want to say too much just because I don't want people to get sort of the wrong idea about undocumented people and Mexican people, but again, I got involved. I kept getting involved with the wrong crowd, and eventually I picked up a couple of charges that were felonies, two felonies and one
Are
misdemeanor.
you able to elaborate on them?
I can elaborate. They were drug related charges. Drug related charges. Um, brought on by somebody. It wasn't like police were doing good police work or anything like that. Somebody sort of pointed the finger. Somebody went and uh, how would you call it? I don't want to say snitched, but essentially that's what it was. And they hit me with two felonies and a misdemeanor. And I remember getting those papers in the mail, man. I couldn't believe it, especially when I found out who exactly, sort of ratted me out. I would say I couldn't believe it, and the felonies were 10 years, 15 years consecutively, and then 5 years of probation for the misdemeanor. So about 30 years altogether. That's when I realized I'm like, man, this is getting a little steep. And this is when I sort of started deciding, like, you know what, maybe this is it for me. I'm going to clear my name. I'm going to take a plea deal. I'm going to pay some fines. I'm going to do this, do that. But this is it for me. I'm just going to sort of get out of the game, if you want to call it that way. I don't think I was that deep into it to say it like that. But just to get my life back in track. What ended up happening was a morning that I was supposed to be at court, at Washtenaw Court, 8 in the morning. I was supposed to be there. I asked a member from the Washtenaw Interfaith Coalition for Immigrant Rights, Wicker, which I've mentioned before in another episode. Go watch the previous episodes. I worked for them. I asked one of their volunteers to drive me, and it was a white female. I don't want to put anybody's name out, but she was kind enough to drive me to court. And that morning, what ended up happening was immigration knew that I was supposed to be somewhere, right? I was supposed to be at court, and they also knew that I was working on a plea deal, that I was working on a way out to where I wasn't going to face any jail time, to where I wasn't going to, be locked up, and I was just going to pay a couple of fines here, a couple of fines there, be on probation sometime and call it a day. That did not look good in their books because according to them, they my record was already extensive enough. You understand?
So I'm confused though. Were you already seen and known by immigration while they're looking at you to be an illegal immigrant?
Before this date, I had never had a close encounter or experience with any immigration officer, Homeland Security officer.
But
Never
did they
had a close
know?
encounter.
Did they know? When did they know? Let me rephrase it. When did they know Manny does not belong here in the United States? He's an illegal immigrant.
I have to say that it was when those felonies were sort of dropped on my head. I have to say that's when. I have to say that's when they
So they could
decided
have
that
come after you then, right?
they could have and they should have, but you got to understand that they also have to do a little bit of research. You know, they have to understand my schedule, where I'm gonna be at, what times I'm leaving my home,
Why?
what times I'm
Why?
coming.
All I feel like all they need to know is, are do you belong here? Are you a citizen? And that's knowing your schedule.
Yeah,
How does that prove if you're a citizen?
no. So what they want to do is they don't want to just how would you call it? Do a raid. Even if they have a warrant for your arrest, they cannot lawfully raid anybody's home. Not
They
immigration
can
can.
unlawfully profile you and follow you home.
They can, but that wasn't immigration. That was Washtenaw police. Washtenaw County Sheriff Department. So when you're a federal agent, like yeah, you might think like yeah, I can break a lot more laws, but you're also like a little bit more under the radar. Like you have to watch what you do. So, from my understanding, because they told me this, was that they had been sort of watching me for the past 7 months. You know, and during these 7 months, I had been fighting my case because again, I wasn't just gonna take the 30 years and just call it a day. No, I was gonna look for a way to where it's like, okay, let's come to an understanding. I'll pay some money. I'll do probation, whatever it is. And when I was supposed to be there to sign my plea deal and accept the plea deal, I never arrived to court. I never arrived. I never arrived to court that day. Immigration stopped me on the corner of Michigan Avenue and Ridge Road. They stopped me there, three SUVs, and it's actually a day I'll never forget. It's almost like a scene out of a movie because I
You were
saw
on
them
foot or in a car.
in car. Remember, I had somebody driving me. I had
Oh, that's
somebody
right.
driving me just because I wanted to be extra cautious. I wanted to be extra cautious. I wanted to, have somebody there in case shit went sideways. I wanted to have somebody there in case police profiled me and pulled over my car or whatever. That sort of thing. And actually, it wasn't even my car that we were driving in. It wasn't even my car, but immigration already knew. Like I'm telling you, they did their research extensively. They knew somebody's gonna come pick him up from his house and take him to court this morning at this time. They're gonna
Now,
take this route.
I just because we're getting to this point where we're wrapping up. Do you
Sure.
think, in all honesty, that you still had a record? But if you would have stopped doing what you were doing at some point, prior to shit really becoming like on a felony kind of level, in your mind, do you think that you would have been caught to a point where you've been deported?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so because I don't think immigration and federal agents care so much about misdemeanors, speeding tickets, driving without a license, a possession of 2 grams of weed. No, I don't think that's really what they care about. They care about, and I'm not saying this is what I was arrested for or deported for, but they care about little things like drug-related kidnappings, 2 pounds in the trunk. They care about distribution of hard drugs, cocaine, meth, etc., etc. That's what they care about.
Also, this is another thing that I just wanted to throw out there because there are many people that may be watching this. Maybe they're an illegal immigrant or know somebody that's an illegal immigrant. So I kind of want to end on this note. What would be your advice to some people that are falling down that same path but haven't been caught yet?
Think about why you are in America in the first place. Think about it. You are not there to become a drug kingpin. You are not to be, in the streets. You are there as a guest in that country. It's not your country. It certainly wasn't mine. I'm back in Mexico. So behave as a guest. Behave as a guest. Respect everything and everyone around you. Because at the end of the day, you're there for a better life, not a life that can put yourself in jeopardy and your loved ones in jeopardy as well. And that's something that I did not understand uh, early enough.
Now I know that we're out of time here, and I had another question. We were going to move into the point where you get to jail, but we'll save that for next episode. I'm surprised by taking in all of this stuff, and I have so many more questions. Number one, I don't even know how the fuck you got to school without a driver's license and a job and a car. I felt like you had to buy a car. You have to have a driver's license. So all that shit. That's like another 10 episodes we could travel down just to figure out that. How one could get away with all of that stuff and not be on the radar at all to have done all that stuff. But I've learned a lot, like I said, that I did not know about you and your story, and it's definitely starting to pick up, and I look forward to continuing it. Is there any other kind of thoughts or whatnot that you might want to put out there before we end the episode?
I say this at the end of every show, at the end of every episode, man. Tune in next week. Things, as you can see, are getting spicy. Whether you care or you don't care, just tune in, man. Subscribe, like, comment some questions. We'll be here. We'll be here for a little longer. So enjoy us while you can.
Well, I think whether people care or don't care, this is the whole point of this show: is that everybody has a story, and whether one cares or does not care about your story, they have theirs, and they might see themselves inside the seat telling their story. And it's just important, I think, and I'm sorry that we're running over just a little bit, but it's just important to understand that everyone has that story. It's what makes all of us different, and it's definitely something that becomes humbling because whereas I'm an actual citizen. I'll never run into that problem of being deported back to Mexico, but maybe I sneak into Mexico. Now all of a sudden the tables are turned and then I run into that, so it just becomes something humbling where you understand other people's stories so that you don't fall to the same kind of things. They say that a lot of people, they go through that shit so that somebody else doesn't have to, and so you experienced your stuff and your trials and tribulations, and you tell your story to so many other people, and that hopefully becomes the eye opener, whereas you didn't have somebody there during your path. You were met, you personally, you were handpicked personally to go through this stuff so that you can tell your story to other people so that they don't have that same kind of trials and tribulation. So again, thank you, Manny. I can't wait to kind of delve into it next episode where we'll kind of get deeper into what happened after being on the radar, being picked up, and having to be faced with possible felony charges. Thank you so much for being here. And as always, it's been an exciting episode of The Story Of, and everyone else for tuning in. Check us out next week. Whatever you do, don't